January 6, 2021, the riot at the Capitol. 2 years of investigations have followed.
Donald Trump summoned a mob to Washington, D.C.
Recommendations for criminal charges go to the top, but have the most thorough inquiries since 9/11 and following actions been even-handed?
It wasn't only shock and awe in how they came to your house, it was shock and awe in the charging too, shock and awe across the board.
This week, we raised the question about investigating the investigators.
America has become a global gas station at the time of an energy crisis.
Do we have enough to supply what we need here in the U.S. and also help out Europe?
We look at an odd energy balance where the U.S. is helping to heat Europe, while fuel prices at home are making it an expensive winter for Americans.
Here's the problem. In this environment, there are a lot of powerful forces trying to make sure certain views aren't heard.
One has to be careful how one wants to play games and weaponize language, terms, and concepts because they can backfire.
And in today's world of influence-fueled divide, there might be a reason to return to the old ways of agreeing to disagree.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. It's been 2 years since the infamous January 6 rally for President Trump. The subsequent rioting at the U.S. Capitol has become one of the most prosecuted events in U.S. history. About 1,000 people have been charged with crimes. One side claims it was an insurrection, a bigger threat to America than the 9/11 Islamic extremist terrorist attacks that killed nearly 3,000. Another side claims Trump supporters have been unfairly targeted. Today, we look at a little reported facet of the fallout after J6.
FBI? Yes. All right, you can't step out with us, please, sir.
March 4th, 2021. Surveillance video shows FBI agents, weapons drawn, surrounding the Texas home of Trennis Evans.
Looked like a dozen agents around your house.
Oh, it's a lot more than that, yeah. So there was 20-plus agents there. They had snipers. They had vehicles to block off the street. I mean, it was insane.
And your 13-year-old son is out on the front deck with his hands up.
Yeah.
That's his son, blue shirt, hands up. Considering the presence of a small army from the FBI, you might think Evans was a vicious criminal, armed and dangerous. In fact, he had no history of violence. This was his crime. He's in the yellow hat, climbing through a window to enter the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
People were coming out of the building saying the police are letting us in. You can go in, you can just walk around, everybody's taking videos, it's fine.
In videos, you can hear Evans as he holds his camera at his chest and urges fellow protesters to be peaceful. Most were.
Do not harm the police. Do not hurt the buildings. Do not destroy your own property.
I took to the megaphone. We back the blue. We support the police. Don't break, don't damage, don't harm, don't steal. This is a peaceful protest.
Evans says the FBI had paid him a friendly visit just after January 6th. He offered his full cooperation. They said they'd be in touch.
Yes.
FBI?
So he was shocked by the armed raid on his home weeks later.
I mean, this was all part of the shock and awe they promised everybody. It wasn't only shock and awe in how they came to your house, it was shock and awe in the charging too, shock and awe across the board.
Evans is one of many who questioned the overnight come-from-behind victory for Joe Biden. Tens of thousands attended the massive pro-Trump rally on January 6th.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will...
I didn't go there for an insurrection. Where's my gun? You mean the most armed populace on the face of the planet came for an insurrection? You know, by percentage, you know, it came for an insurrection. I didn't bring any firearms.
Normally, the public has the right to watch Congress. But with overwhelming masses and fears of violence, the Capitol was made a no-go zone. Crowds pushing past barriers were breaking the law. There's little dispute over prosecuting violent rioters. controversy surrounds the FBI's heavy-handed treatment of some peaceful demonstrators. Stephen Friend is among more than a dozen FBI agents reported to be blowing the whistle on the agency's alleged political bias. He told me he was suspended after refusing to take part in SWAT raids of nonviolent January 6 suspects.
What did you think was so wrong about the raids?
I felt that there was definitely a harder hand in the way that the arrests and the searches were going to be carried out. Regardless of the individual's involvement in January 6th.
January 6th has become one of the most aggressively prosecuted events in U.S. history, with Trump's enemies claiming it was an insurrection that threatened democracy.
Donald Trump summoned a mob to Washington, D.C., and ultimately spurred that mob to wage a violent attack on our democracy.
Trump supporters lodge accusations of politically driven investigations, and some Republicans are asking whether law enforcement may have been driving the January 6 chaos more than investigating it.
How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
The FBI's role has come under increased scrutiny as their agents and informants have been revealed to be working undercover at high levels within the groups they're investigating. Take the 2020 domestic terror plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat. According to court filings, there were more FBI agents and informants working undercover in the militia group than there were militia members who were arrested. Even the leader of the group who was driving the scheme was an FBI source. There were also FBI agents or informants secretly working inside two major groups charged with planning the Capitol breach. A leader of the Proud Boys, not present for the riots, pleaded guilty to seditious conspiracy. It turns out the Proud Boys had up to 8 FBI-linked people on the inside before the riots. And the number 2 officer in the Oath Keepers was an FBI informant, according to court records. Full Measure has reviewed video evidence with more than a dozen current and former FBI agents and law enforcement officials. They've flagged what they see as behavior among both law enforcement and people dressed as protesters that merits further investigation. We wanted to ask the FBI about all of this, but they wouldn't agree to an interview. At congressional hearings, FBI Director Christopher Wray has repeatedly declined to say much about the role of FBI agents and informants on January 6th.
But to the extent that there's a suggestion, for example, that the FBI's confidential human sources or FBI employees in some way instigated or orchestrated January 6th, that's categorically false.
Did you have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol on January the 6th prior to the doors being opened?
Again, I had to be very careful.
It should be a no.
For his part, Trennis Evans says he's not innocent, but insists he's not the most wanted monster he's been made out to be.
I want to own the fact that I broke the law, and I think we should all own the fact that we broke the law, but it's a civil disobedience for 99% of the people there. For the 90% of the people that went in that building, it's like a civil disobedience issue.
Step over here for me, please.
After the drama of the FBI raid, Evans ended up pleading guilty to simple misdemeanors, entering and remaining in a restricted building. In November, he was sentenced to 20 days in a minimum security prison. Forever tarred as an insurrectionist, a label that he says is woefully misapplied.
The Democrat-led congressional investigation of January 6th recently recommended criminal charges against former President Trump. A special counsel appointed by President Biden's Attorney General is overseeing 2 other federal investigations into Trump. Ahead on Full Measure, how war in Ukraine is making it more expensive to heat your home. check your fuel bills. Across the board, prices are up. Natural gas is generally considered the cheapest way to heat most homes, yet Americans are paying nearly a third more than a year ago. Lisa Fletcher explains how a big boom in natural gas production here has gotten caught up in a widespread green energy crisis.
Along the coast of Texas and Louisiana, America has become a global gas station at the time of an energy crisis. Thanks to ports like this, the U.S. has, in the last few years, become the third biggest exporter of natural gas in the world. And at a critical time, with the war in Ukraine upending Europe's traditional supply of gas from Russia, the U.S. is stepping up to keep the lights and heat on in struggling places. Before natural gas can be exported, it's cooled to minus 260 degrees, turning it into a liquid. So cold, the ships have to be protected by a curtain of water as they're loaded in case liquid natural gas hits the steel hull, potentially causing cracks. This plant is owned and run by an American energy company called Cheniere. Anatol Fagan is its executive vice president.
A number of countries, Germany and Italy in particular, relied on Russian volume for almost half of their natural gas requirements. So that is a very difficult dynamic to replace when all of the infrastructure that's been built up over generations that delivers volumes into the center of Europe all of a sudden is dramatically decreased.
U.S. natural gas production took off around 2007 when fracking helped unlock massive reserves. Fracking involves injecting high-pressure liquid into cracks in rock formations to force out previously inaccessible gas and petroleum. As a cleaner-burning fossil fuel, natural gas replacing coal-fired power generation is seen by many as a bridge to a future dominated by renewable energy. But there's a problem. While U.S. gas production has reached record levels, consumers are also seeing records in terms of the prices they pay, with bills rising more than 20% above where they were this time last year. Dina Wiggins is president of the Natural Gas Supply Association.
When there's such an increase in demand, that also creates challenges for people. And the Energy Information Administration says for users of natural gas, they're going to see the highest increases this winter.
Well, I think we need to step back a little bit and look at what happened during the pandemic. Demand for natural gas went down, production went down, a market response. So coming out of the pandemic, when demand started rising, there's a market response to that, and the market response to that is that producers are producing more. Now, our producers are facing the same challenges that lots of industries are facing. You know, supply chain and labor shortages and everything else that people are facing coming out of the pandemic.
And it's not just the challenge of prices. The Biden administration's focus on renewable energy has, according to some in the fossil fuel industry, meant that not enough has been done to incentivize oil and gas production. Then there's distribution, which is limited by pipelines. And in some areas, there just isn't a good way of getting more gas to consumers.
Some regions are definitely more constrained in terms of infrastructure than others. The Northeast in particular is the sort of the poster child for we've got a problem. And the pipeline community is willing to build the pipeline. We've tried to get pipelines into the Northeast. You can't seem to cite a pipeline in the Northeast that goes through the state of New York. New York just does not seem to want a pipeline going through its state. And that's a problem.
And she's right. New England has relatively few pipelines compared to the rest of the U.S. And while the region does have terminals to accept shipments of liquefied gas, there's now strong competition from Europe, where buyers are prepared to pay high prices for gas deliveries. So the other key question is if, amid rising demand, we'll still have enough natural gas to meet domestic needs.
A lot of people think we are approaching an energy crisis here in the United States. In our current circumstance, do we have enough to supply what we need here in the U.S. and also help out Europe?
In short, we do. The U.S. gas industry, from a production standpoint, has basically doubled since around the 2000 timeframe. And it has the resource to continue to grow, continue to meet the requirements not only of the domestic needs, but also of exports, power generation, and serve all of the customers.
But in the global market, companies sell to the highest bidder. Europe is in dire need, has cash and few options, and has the infrastructure to receive and process American gas, leaving the U.S. caught in its own conflicting energy policies, paying more to heat during what may be a long, cold winter.
So is the Biden administration doing anything to try to improve the supply and the distribution of natural gas for us?
Well, the Biden administration's focus remains on renewables. So critics say that is getting in the way of better gas distribution in the United States because they say the administration is blocking permitting for new interstate pipelines. And that's a concern if we want to use more of America's huge gas resources and then continue to supply Europe, which is in dire need right now.
We'll continue to keep our eye on the story. Thanks a lot. And coming up next, new insight into Twitter censorship of one of the scientists we've interviewed who was right about COVID. An update to our reporting and investigations on COVID policies and censorship. It has to do with Twitter's new CEO, Elon Musk, and all of the prior censorship practices he's been revealing at the social media giant.
It turns out one of the many targets under the old Twitter was Dr. Jay Bhattacharya of Stanford, who has spoken out on full measure on several occasions. Bhattacharya led tens of thousands of scientists who signed on to a document opposing the mass COVID lockdowns, the Great Barrington Declaration. The scientists argued that shutting down society would do more harm than good to the public health. According to reports, Twitter secretly put Bhattacharya's account on a trends blacklist, which prevented his tweets from appearing in the platform's popular trending section.
In fact, the kinds of scientific discussions that I took for granted for most of my career cannot survive a situation where you have government bodies controversializing perfectly reasonable positions, suppressing debate and suppressing discussion, employing propaganda techniques like big tech or the press to personally attack the lives of scientists who disagree.
Bhattacharya was also a target of Drs. Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins at the National Institutes of Health. Emails later released showed the two public health officials conspired to smear and do a public takedown of Bhattacharya and his colleagues. When we come back, can we agree to disagree? Let's agree to disagree. It's a concept that may be getting lost in today's heated discourse over practically everything. It's also the title of a book co-authored by critical thinking expert Mickey Huff, director of Project Censored and president of the Media Freedom Foundation.
Instead of jumping into the middle of sort of the maelstrom of where the most contentious things are, we actually started the book by talking about why it's important to learn how to communicate better with people and how critical thinking requires critical listening, empathy. In other words, you really need to understand other people that are different than yourself in order to better be able to convey the things that you think and believe to them in a way that they're more receptive to it.
So here's the problem. In this environment, there are a lot of powerful forces trying to make sure certain views aren't heard. It's almost the opposite of what you're suggesting to be, a critical thinker.
I'm afraid that's right. And the interesting thing is that with the whole fake news meme that kind of got off leash during the Trump presidency, let's not forget the Democrats are the ones that really started that weaponized meme about Russiagate and Russia and the election and so forth. But Trump tactically picked it up and was able to use it in reverse, right? So one has to be careful how one wants to play games and weaponize language, terms, and concepts because they can backfire. Censorship often backfires, for example. So one side wanting to cancel the other side, it ends up coming full circle.
Is there a simple way for you to try to explain to the uninitiated Who's behind this? The confusion that's sown among people, the division, the censoring to try to make only one view heard.
So this is what critical media literacy is about. It's not about just accepting the tools from on high, like from a NewsGuard or from Fact Check or from Snopes, where people are partnering and they're saying, this is true and this is misinformation. See, that whole fake news meme is now misinformation. And now it's the war on misinformation. And interestingly, misinformation only comes from sources that buck establishment narratives. Isn't that curious? And so there's a great effort afoot by these forces to curate those views and to label them misinformation. I mean, I'm an educator, so my job, and I teach social justice studies, and I publish left journalism, and I do, history and political economy, and I'm very critical of the corporate state. But I believe that you can talk to people, and you can talk to people who have corporate backgrounds. You can talk to people with MBAs. You can argue with them, and not arguing and fighting are different things. That's one of the big things we point out in the book. Arguing is an exchange of ideas with supported evidence. Fighting means you're no longer listening to each other, and it's back to the I'm right, you're wrong, no matter what model. And we know that that model has consequences, and they're not usually positive ones. So that makes this a really complicated dance in a lot of ways, whether it's a slam dance or a waltz or a mosh pit of ideas. But we think that people are all in the dance together, and we hope that the things that we put forward, and on our website at projectcensored.org, we offer a lot of free tools for critical media literacy, and we hope that people pick them up and use them. And when they disagree, we hope they use the tools to help explain why they disagree, so that we learn from each other and that we can maybe teach each other things at the end of the day.
By the way, numerous people are credited with first using agree to disagree, including an English playwright named William Wycherley, who used the phrase in a poem in 1706. Coming up next week on Full Measure, a rare interview with a seasoned group of medical pros from the first U.S. hospital to mandate COVID-19 vaccines.
And the level of fear among our colleagues, among the medical staff, in terms of expressing their opinion, whatever it was, because they were afraid that they were going to be retaliated against by the institution, Houston Methodist, was off the charts.
A side of the vaccine mandate story that isn't often told by people who don't usually speak about it publicly. That's next week on Full Measure. Until next time, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Thanks for watching.